This is a picture of me around 15 years ago when I started on my leadership journey. And I've been thinking recently, based on a whole bunch of mentoring and advising that I do, on what I would say to myself 15 years ago about the whole leadership journey. And that's what today's Hacking Academia video is all about. My leadership journey started like a lot of others in academia and research. I started by supervising an individual and then a handful of PhD students. It moved on to becoming a group leader and then deputy or joint leadership of increasingly large groups, to the point where I am today, where I am the director of a large robotics research center, and all the leadership responsibilities and opportunities and challenges that that entails. I would never ever claim to say that I am a great leader. I think I am a leader in learning, so to speak, and I think I will be a leader in learning while I am active in this field for the rest of my career, and I think most other people would say the same thing. That said, it's been an incredible learning journey, and I've learned so much, sometimes quite painfully, sometimes quite fulfillingly, about leadership and at least what it means for me personally and my whole attitude towards it. And that's what I hope to share with you, and also my hypothetical younger self from 15 years ago. I'll start with the most obvious thing, which is that leadership, at least in my experience, has been an incredibly fulfilling journey and an activity that is incredibly fulfilling, but also one that is constantly challenging. Challenging because you are dealing with situations you've never dealt before, challenging because the tool set that served you so well as a junior career person do not necessarily translate naturally into being a leader, and challenging just simply because you are learning every day in your leadership journey. The first misconception I would correct, at least for my younger self, and I'm interested in whether others think the same way, is that being a leader is not 100% about the grand visionary initiatives that you set out and initiate and execute and try to change the world, or at least the part of the world that you are responsible for. Grand initiatives and being a visionary is definitely a key component of, I think, being a good leader. But a lot of the leadership journey is not about those grand visions. A lot of those leadership aspects are simply about turning up day in, day out, and engaging in the process of leadership. Even when you are tired, even when you are going through a really rough period, turning up and being a leader is a big part of the role. I mentioned in the opening statements that it's a continual learning process. One of the interesting aspects of being in some sort of leadership role is if you continue to rise up through the so-called leadership ranks, your learning job is never done, because the things that you learn, a lot of it on the job about being a leader of a few PhD students or a postdocs or just a small group, some of that transfers to leading a much larger group, but a lot of it doesn't. And so there's a whole bunch of extra things that you need to learn each time you step up in your leadership journey. Stephen Covey talks a lot about interdependence in his 7 Habits book, and many others have spoken about this, and this is a key part of the leadership journey. So it most definitely can't all be about you. If you try and make it all about you and have everything rest on you critically, you will break and you will fail as a leader. So working closely with others, relying on them, trusting them, working with them when things go wrong, which they inevitably do, and also when you yourself screw up as a leader, is a critical part of the leadership journey. And this is particularly a challenging transition for many individual high achievers in academia and research, because it really represents a significant mind frame shift from what they may have been used to earlier in their career. Two of the key concepts that come up a lot in leadership and indeed in management are consultation and transparency. So consultation is simply about, there's a decision coming up or an issue that you need to deal with. You ask the people who are affected, and perhaps even people who aren't directly affected but can give you good advice, what they think you should do, what their perspective on the situation is. Transparency is a little bit different. Transparency is being as open as possible and communicating as well as possible why decisions were made, why things happened in a certain way, what the reasons for a certain decision being made were. And in my experience, both are really important in the leadership journey, but I think transparency is a little underrated compared to consultation. There are a lot of situations in leadership where full extensive consultation either is not possible or is possible, but it's very likely that because of heavy constraints on the situation, a lot of that consultative process will essentially be thrown away because you can't actually respond to a lot of that input. And in those situations especially, maximizing transparency, so communicating very clearly what the factors were that led into a decision and why a decision was made, in many ways are more important or more often important than consultation. You obviously can't always be 100% transparent for a number of reasons, but you can usually be relatively transparent. And I like to be in a situation where not everyone necessarily agrees about a decision, but everyone understands very clearly the parameters about why a decision was made, even if they disagree with parts of it. A lot of group leaders in academia really care about and look after their team. And so if anything goes wrong, they're there with the student or the postdoc until late in the night, providing them plenty of support, and sometimes this strays into their personal lives as well. One of the things or realities about leadership is that you most definitely need to be highly empathetic to all of the people that you're working with, but there should be some caps on how far you take, I guess, the actioning from that empathy. Because if you go down too far down that journey with all the key people you're responsible for, you will absolutely break. Earlier in my leadership journey, I made the mistake of, I think, over-engaging in processes to the point where at least once I became actually physically sick from the stress of dealing with some very stressful situations of people I was advising, mentoring, or supervising. And so there has to be some level of self-care and some checks and balances on the amount of involvement and empathy. Again, this is where bringing in other people to help support you can come in handy, but if you break or catastrophically implode as a leader, you are not helping anyone. If you interviewed at some stage for an Amazon position, they had a bunch of leadership principles, and one of them is that a leader is often right. And this is a really tricky concept to think about because there are a lot of unhelpful sort of stereotypes of a leader who is perfect and always gets things right. And it's A, unrealistic, and B, not really helpful. At the same time, as a leader, you do, in my opinion, need to be mostly right about situations as often as possible. If you are constantly making what is clearly the wrong call, a lot of the time it is generally not a tenable situation. It's extremely exhausting for you as the leader, and it can be very corrosive to the morale and cohesiveness of the team that you lead. It's also perhaps a sign that you're not quite ready for the level of leadership that you're currently engaged in, and it might pay to go back and learn some fundamental skills and do some more development before you step up to that level again. There's another key debate in the leadership field, which is the level of deep expertise and technical competence you should have in the key areas that the people that you lead are working in. And there's a number of takes on it. So there are definitely examples of people who have absolutely zero direct experience with the detailed technical areas of the groups that they lead, and that can work. At the other end of the spectrum, I remember in interviewing or talking to people in tech companies and startups, they wanted a leader who, if necessary, could step in and demonstrate at least equal and perhaps superior technical skills to the people that they are leading when necessary. My personal take is that it's neither extreme, and obviously each extreme can work, but that it's really somewhere in the middle. So I would expect many, not all, but many good leaders to have had deep technical, authentic experience in at least some subsets of the areas that are the primary activities of the people that they lead. And if that's not the case, that they've perhaps engaged in some substantial upskilling and familiarization with those later in their career. Leadership and management are both concepts that are talked about often and interchangeably. You need both. So I've seen or witnessed individuals who are fantastic visionary leaders, they're very inspirational, but their day-to-day management skills are atrocious. And in situations where they need to also be a good manager, it effectively completely negates their leadership capabilities, because really bad management is again corrosive to the functioning of the organization that you lead. And so for most situations, unless it's split up in some sort of split of responsibility, a leader should also be an effective and competent manager. While leaders often have direct supervisory influence and line management responsibilities for the individuals under them, as you move up through the leadership ranks, this whole concept of soft influence becomes ever more apparent. And so this is not the situation where there's a report in your team and you tell them exactly what to do. This is the art of working with people, negotiating and discussing with people in order to achieve aims of mutual interest, and sometimes aims that are only really in your own group's interests, but in a way where you can convince the others that this is a good thing to do. And so this whole concept of soft influence, where you definitely can't tell people to do something, becomes increasingly important. One of the other key aspects of leadership that I've gone over several times in my career to date is this balance between optimism and accurate reality. And so I think at some stage early, I was full of energy. That energy reflected in how I led a small group, and it was sort of have a crack at everything, even if the odds are stacked against you. And then I think I swung a little bit too far to the other way, where I was able to get very accurate, very good intel on the actual prospects of opportunities or things that people in the group wanted to do. But because it's such a competitive and challenging field, those numbers at face value were incredibly off-putting. So where I'm at right now is really combining the two. So generally having that optimism and enthusiasm and aspirational sort of attitude towards things, even things that may be very difficult, but combining that with a realistic appraisal of the actual chances of the opportunity in terms of expectation management, in terms of mitigating the effects of rejection and not being successful when you first try for these things. And I think getting that combination right, especially for your group, is really, really difficult, but also really important. Finally, one of the things I want to point out about the leadership journey is doing leadership is a great way to develop a lot more empathy and understanding of the leaders who are 1 or 2 steps above you. You will encounter constantly people where perhaps you are critiquing what a leader has done in your organization or outside of your organization, and people will often step in and point out that you obviously don't know the whole story, you don't know the whole context, and there's a whole bunch of reasons why decisions that seem really stupid or counterproductive have been made, and these could be very good reasons. And a lot of that, I guess, wisdom and perspective really comes about from living a similar leadership journey yourself. Leadership is a path that varies for most individuals. Some people want to remain, I guess, individual technical contributors for their entire life, and that is fantastic. Some people are purely focused on the leadership journey and climbing up the ranks as fast and as high as they can. And a lot of people are somewhere in the middle, where leadership organically becomes a part of what they do in their professional career as they become more senior. You don't get a lot of formal training to be a leader. We and many others are encouraging people to grab those formal training opportunities. The reality is most of it's picked up on the job. You make lots and lots of mistakes along the way. Hopefully you work in an environment where those mistakes are mostly understood, dealt with, and are chalked up to, I guess, a learning experience. But ultimately, it is a part of a professional career that I would strongly recommend everyone at least try and engage in. It also has a lot of on-flow benefits by learning how to be an effective leader. You gain a lot of benefits and skill sets that will also transfer to the more technical or other non-leadership aspects of your career. Finally, a bit of much needed humility. So if I'd asked myself 15 years ago to give these same perspectives, I would have given a whole bunch of opinions. Maybe a few of them might have been on the mark. A lot of them probably would have been cringe-inducing. And I am under no illusions that when I look back at what I'm saying in this video and 10 or 15 years ago, I think my perspectives will have changed substantially again. But right now, I think this is a fair snapshot of a subset of the key concepts and issues that I've encountered in my leadership journey. It will be different for every individual person, but I hope that these particular tidbits are useful to you.